This is the Farm Hop Life podcast, a traveling homestead family. I'm Matt DeRozier. Today, my guest is Nathan Gates. He's been homesteading for 10 years, homeschooling, and he's a self employed psychotherapist. I'm going to pretend I know what the difference is between therapist and therapy and all that. But now he's living in West Illinois. And before that, he lived in Colorado. I'd like to hear more about that. But why psychotherapy or psychotherapist?
Well, that's there can be a short or a long answer to that. A psychotherapist, specifically a licensed clinical professional counselor. So there's, a whole range, of professionals, from a psychologist who's a, PhD trained in, basically counseling techniques and psychological testing and whatnot. There's psychiatrists, which are medical doctors. There's social workers, which are master's level clinicians. There's counselors like myself, which is master's level clinician. So that's the short version of it. For me, it was kind of a roundabout way. A lot of times people will say that they got into the profession to help people. That wasn't really why I got into it. I was just curious. Like I just curious about people. I was curious about minds, how they work, how people think, how people change. And so I just was curious and went down that road. And then this seemed like a practical application of it. Helping people is not a bad thing, and it's not. I enjoy my work, but that's not like the primary drive to get into it. It was a lot of curiosity, and then became, as I learned more and became more involved, really drawn to the compassionate aspect of it, and really, helping people see from a different perspective. In a nutshell.
Sure. I thought about therapists and whatnot. I'm like, I would not like their job. I could not do their job if my life depended on it. Like listening to other people's problems all day. Is it more than that? Because that's just kind of like the gist I get from it. What is it really?
Yeah, yes, you do listen to people's problems. That is a large component of the job. But, people are interesting.
Yes.
And so the way I see it is I get to interact with and learn from and, see life through the eyes of all different kinds of people. I mean, it was a hell of a way. I'm not from here. I'm from Southern Illinois originally. And then I moved to Colorado. My wife and I lived in Colorado for 11 years and then moved back here, which is roughly, where my wife is from. Actually, we live in her house. It's been her family for 160 years or so. I work in an adjacent town. I don't work in the town she grew up in, and we didn't really know many people. And I opened up a practice just right away. Like, this is how 10 years ago, this is how we were going to make it work. We just like moved back home and I decided to, open up a practice, and just that's how we were going to do it. And it's a really interesting way to get to know a community, for sure, is by not really knowing a lot of people, and then being a therapist, because you just you really get to know what people in the community do. Learn all about because people talk about their work, their jobs. You learn all about what people do for work, how people live. The kinds of struggles that people have. And of course, everyone's different, has different struggles, but there are sort of universal themes, and then there's regional themes, and you get to know those. And so it's a fascinating job. And, if all it was listening, I don't think I would enjoy it as much as I do, but, without getting really deeply into the weeds, so much of it is just helping. I'm a different set of eyes, and I look from a completely different angle. So it's helping people to, shift their perspective to see things that they might not see, That's one of the functions. So sometimes it is a function. People just need to say something. People
Sure.
just have something. Like there have been many, 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 many times when you are the first person that somebody has told something to, like it's like a deep, painful thing. And when you say talking about people's problems all day and that being difficult, it's like, well, moments like that they feel extremely privileged and special. And like when you have an experience like that and someone like trusts you enough, because it doesn't usually happen in the first session, like someone you've worked with someone enough and you've built enough trust with the person that they are willing to share, like that's a pretty, dare I say, almost sacred thing. And it feels really powerful to be a part of. And to see somebody be able to be unburdened, that's quite a privilege. So there are many privileges to the work. It has its...
No, I could see that. I could see that very much. There was I was on a job recently doing some electrical work, and this homeowner and I got to talking, and she just completely opened up, and I was like, wow, this is really different. Normally it's just like this small chit chat.
Mhm.
Oh, you got a family? Yep, blah blah blah, whatever. I mean, we were talking about religion, we were talking about drugs, we were talking about all this stuff, and she was just like, you could tell she felt lighter after having the conversation. And so that was after you explain kind of these things that people just don't really talk about but are willing to share in certain aspects. Yeah, it's pretty rare and it's pretty cool when it happens. I can see that. I just don't know how much of it I could take.
That's not the hard part, actually. I suppose it would be because that's not, that's not all the time, those, right. And there's struggles like any other job. And, if I schedule too many sessions in a day and it's less about the content, like somebody, oh my gosh, I don't want to listen to this. It's more about wow, I have been very focused and attending to another person for 5 hours now. And that's hard. It's just it's not even the emotional challenge of the content so much as it is for me, okay, stay focused. That's a long time. That's a long time. And so that's a part of the challenge. That's a big part of the challenge. Cause that's the part of the job for me. That's kind of an uneasy fit is I don't love sitting still. And so that can be a real challenge because it's a lot of that. I ended up, it's kind of early when I was doing this, I had back problems and I was in this armchair. And so I got rid of the armchair and I figured I needed something else to sit on. So for a while I sat on the floor. Right. And so you can imagine people coming in to see me and I'm, I have long hair and I don't wear shoes and I'm sitting on the floor. So I have my own, I have my own thing. I have my own, what I do. No, no guru. Yeah, I don't like guru vibes, but it is definitely, I do my own thing, but I think part of that really works. Everybody's different. Not everybody's going to be a fit with every particular therapist or counselor they see. But I think I make people feel, really at home and like they can make themselves comfortable because, I certainly do. But yeah, so I sat on the floor for a while and then went through a bunch of different chairs to find the right thing. And then I own 3 of these now. They're these stools that have a rocker bottom. And this is what I sit in all the time now. It keeps my back straight and I kind of can move a little bit. So they're really great.
I kind of feel like I need one of them. It's called a buoy.
The buoy, yes. They're really good.
All right. I'm going to make a note.
Yeah.
Buoy. I don't know how to spell it. Good enough.
BUOY. Yeah. But they're real nice. They kind of adjust up and down and they're real stable. You almost you have to actually try to fall off of them, but at the same time they rock quite a bit. And they keep your back. I haven't had a back problem since, and I was really and it made me tired all day, sitting in that armchair. So it's been a real, they're great. Like I said, I have multiple ones because,
Sure.
they're awesome.
Since we're showing off chairs, I'm in a 120-year-old broken chair. This was my wife's great grandparents, something like that. So try to fix it, and it's still not fixed. So, but I always see people in like gaming chairs and stuff, and so like I'm like, they look bulky, and they got like 8 levers. Like that looks looks dumb. So I'll look into the buoy. Thanks for the tip.
Nice, simple. Keeps your you have to keep your back engaged to sit in it because there's no back. So
Sure.
it's and I sit in it 5-6 hours a day. So it maybe 7. So yeah, plenty.
So you had mentioned you like getting different inputs, different points of view, and I think that's why I really wanted you to have you on the podcast, because on Twitter you do have very different points of view. Like it's not like completely contrasting to where it's just like argumentative. It's just like, but have you thought about it like this? And to give people an idea of what I'm talking about, you filled out my guest form, and you said, the question is, what would you like to promote? A lot of people have a website or a product or something, and you said being a human. What does that mean? What does that mean to you when you say I'd like to promote being a human?
Man, I'm trying to think of what I meant when I wrote it.
We can come back to it if you want.
No, it's all right. I just authentic. I think it could be authentic. Maybe that's what I'm getting at. On Twitter, especially because I've had an account for a long time, but I never really used Twitter much. Except I'd log on now and again if I wanted to like there was some current thing happening and I was just log on, but it really wasn't much. I didn't start using it actually until about, 6-9 months ago. And I just, at first you see the surface layer of Twitter, and it can just be so nasty and so gross.
Yes,
and
definitely.
Just like, which is kind of what I always thought. That's why I was like, ugh. But then I was using Facebook, which is the worst place in the world. And
worse than Twitter? That's hard to beat.
Oh man. Oh God. But I discovered, right, that actually you can use Twitter in a way that is pretty human. And I think that's what I meant, like by being a human, just being authentic, relating to other people as if they're people.
Sure.
And not other, not some other category of people, not some like that they're actual flesh and blood human beings and they have experiences just like you do. And that you can know them, and that you can almost always, and this I really believe you can almost always, with no matter who, find some way to connect with anybody, right? There's something with anybody that you can connect around. And when you do that, when you make that sort of connection, that's really the heart of what I'm getting at when I say, be a human. Is like, find a way. There's so many easy ways, so many signifiers, so many buzzwords you can use, so many things you can use that can divide, or so many things that you can do to create like a superficial connection. But like, and sometimes those can be really meaningful too, but to really find something that you can, for instance, like a story just popped in my head. This was years and years ago. I studied abroad. And I was on a train in Europe, and I remember leaving Paris. I was sitting next to a gentleman that I believe I learned he was from Algeria, and neither one spoke the other's language at all. But we were really trying, and somehow I got across to him that I was from the Midwest, Illinois. And he was like, Michael Jordan. Right. And so like we both had a huge smile and laugh, and we're like really, really excited about it, because this was, not during his heyday, but just probably after he won, like a year or so after he won, after the Bulls won their sixth championship. So he was still legend, top of the world. I mean, he still is a legend, but at the time still very much the top of
it's relevant then.
Yes. Yeah.
I got you.
So you can find a way to connect with anybody, right? And that's and that's what I mean. To say be human is if you're looking for more ways to connect, then not that dividing isn't. I mean, sometimes you do have to understand, right, difference. I'm not saying like, oh, you paper overall difference. And I mean, I think you'd see that. You look at my Twitter feed, I definitely highlight difference a lot, but it's not coming from a place of trying to put people in different camps so you can fight, but just to understand. To understand someone's perspective, and to really connect with somebody, you have to understand, where you see things similarly, but also where you don't see things similarly.
Yes. You get into some weird fights on Twitter. Like I have three somewhat recent was it three? 2 or 3 recent fights on Twitter that I was like, I'm trying to follow along. I'm like, I don't know what's going on here. One was a couple weeks ago about Wendell Berry, and I think you had an awesome post, like right up on Wendell Berry. One was like attacking him for something, which I totally don't understand what that was all about in the first place. But like your rebuttal to that was just like on point. And lately, like it seems like this week, you're like getting in like arguments about like hippies or something like that. And I'm like,
oh yeah,
I'm like so far removed from like what's like going on. I'm like, I don't have time to like figure out where this all started and then come back to present day. I'm just like, I can't remember what the other one is. There's something else that was brought up recently, and I was like, what's all this chatter going on? But yeah,
the one about the hippies was really just just kind of mostly having fun shit posting with that.
Sure.
That was just kind of playfully playing with stereotypes in a way that probably isn't going to hurt anybody's feelings too bad.
That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And even if it does hurt feelings, that's fine too.
They're just
people get upset about so many things that whatever. So you started in Illinois, and you went to Colorado, and then you came back to Illinois. In that journey, when did you pick up like farming and homesteading? Do you call yourself a farmer, or do you call yourself a homesteader?
I find more with farming because I want to make money.
That's a good reason.
Emphasis on want to. We're still early, but that's sort of how I view it more as farming than homesteading. Because homesteading has a real self-sufficient vibe to me, which is cool and fine and great. Yeah, but for me, it's I don't know. I have a complicated relationship with that word, I guess, because I will at the same time also use that. I'll also describe myself that way sometimes. So I don't know. I have chickens and garden and cows and plant trees and like I do all the things homesteaders do, and I have for a long time. So the farming, I guess that's what they seem separate to me though. Like they're separate things. Like there's the homesteading, and then there's the farming that are obviously they seem related, but and these are just distinctions in my own head. I'm not trying to make these distinctions as something anyone else should acknowledge at all. This is just how I try to think about them.
That's fine. It's a talking point. I mean, we did I like on our men's forum. So like guys that have been on the podcast, whoever's available and forever how long, or whenever how long, we talk for an hour every Monday night. And one episode we did just like is like homesteader. Is that a bad word? Like that was the whole topic the whole night. And so you bring up a good point. Like, okay, so you're doing the same actions, but is the difference intent? Like So a homesteader, like I want to feed myself and my family. Cool. Farmers usually do that, then some, like kind of take it to the next level is like kind of typically how that process goes. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Maybe I think there's we definitely, part of the beef we produce is the beef that we eat. Maybe I'm kind of insecure actually, because I feel like I'm a bad gardener. And some of the homesteady things are just things that I have beaten my head against, and I think it's so I have a lot of irons in the fire. I'm doing too much.
Oh, yeah.
I can't fully commit. I think that's part of, for me, that's the thing, because I work full time. That's my that takes a lot of time. And then my Emily and I, the farm thing, sort of like a her and I joint venture, like the cows. That's sort of her and I together. And the way we have tended to think about it, because she's never met an animal that she doesn't love. She's an animal person all the way down, except possums. For some reason, she has a weird thing about possums. Like, she does not like those, but every other animal on the earth, I think she's just an animal person. And so she's really like pays a lot of attention to the cattle's needs, and the genetics, and keeping track of like the calving stuff. She's really on top of all that.
Nice.
And I kind of am support with all that. And then my bigger fascination by far is the pastures. I'm super in the infrastructure, so like the fences and all that, and making sure that the cows have food and that the pastures are getting what they need, and that's my big fascination. And then the biodiversity that comes with rotational grazing, and managing the surrounding woodlands, and clearing little areas for silvopasture, and letting letting some of the woods creep into the pasture so they have shade, and just kind of like managing all that is what I get really excited about.
Sure.
But what's been really hard, and so this is why I think maybe part of this, like, you caught me at kind of a moment where I might be feeling a little insecure about a lot of it, is because she's had an awful ankle injury that she's been struggling with for about 2 years. And so I've been really doing kind of everything through no fault of her own at all.
Right.
But I'm burnt out as hell, to be completely honest about it, and like really need her ankle to be feeling better. So that's sort of, maybe that's part of it too, is feeling like, well, if I were really a homesteader, I'd be much more focused on being self-sufficient, but instead, but I have to work full time to keep it all afloat. So I think there's like, just sometimes I feel like I have so many things in the fire that I'm like maybe a little shy of completely claiming that. I don't know.
It's better than not trying, right? And maybe it's like I'm still trying to come up with a topic for Monday's episode, and I was kind of leaning towards kind of like priorities, like how do you prioritize things? And you kind of gave me an idea just now, like maybe. Like, okay, so maybe if you got like this plan of like being like a farmer, right, to like, make money at it, like, awesome goal, you should do that. But maybe like and I'm guilty of this too, by the way, like maybe we need to look in before we look out, like look at like our own property and the things, like our operations, like let's tighten up some loose ends before we go try to make it bigger. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's for sure. And that's a mistake. And it's not, it's one of those things that's not, I mean, life happens, and
Oh yeah.
when, I mean, we didn't plan on Emily hurting herself pretty significantly, and I think that kind of, that presented it's been a real challenge to kind of like, it's at a pretty crucial time. Now, on the other hand, my 14-year-old is pretty engaged, and I mean, he is like strong like a man now and has become like really helpful. So that's great, and he's into it.
That's awesome.
It's
dude.
not. I mean, he's a 14-year-old, so sometimes it's like, dude, come on. But like, he's really into it and like super helpful, and he's been my right hand a lot of the time. And I think we're, I think we're gonna get over the hump here, but I think what you're saying, like, well, I think I've kind of passed, and I guess I should say I'm a homesteader, because I was doing this whole thread of Twitter posts on my laws of homesteading, because I've been here for 10 years, and I feel like, well, I can jokingly make Twitter posts about it. It's, I mean, I think people should know that it's pretty hard. It's not, I'm not saying that to discourage anybody. Don't. Life should, I mean, if life's meaningful, it's going to be hard. Doing hard things
go.
I mean, why would you try to live and not do hard things? But so, that's not meant as discouragement, but it is an eyes open sort of thing. Like, it's not like it is on Instagram. I mean, I guess unless you have,
I say that all the time.
Unless you have so much money that you can just pay other people to do it.
Like, I followed somebody for all of 30 seconds. I was like, oh, this person looks interesting. And every picture is her just drinking wine in her garden. Like, her sunflowers are, I mean, it's a nice looking garden, but that's all it is. Like, okay, never mind then.
Yeah.
Next. I mean, if that's what you want to do in your garden, do it. Whatever, I don't care. But that's not for me. That's not. I don't follow that. So,
I mean, I will say drinking wine in the garden is all right. I am down with drinking wine in the garden.
Hey man, that's fine. But that's just, if that's all you do, you might have a problem.
Yeah, exactly. But a well-earned glass of wine, but I'd prefer by campfire. But yeah,
sure, I agree. So how did you get started homesteading? What motivates you to grow your own food? Like, why would you, if it's so hard, why would you do this?
Oh boy. So, and this is why the homesteading, like, it's not like the self-reliance isn't my primary thing, right? Like, and that's why I think that's why I'm kind of have some, not, I mean, I think the term's fine. I don't have any judgment of the term, but I kind of, as far as its application to me, self-reliance is really not, it's good, but we moved here because we had, this farm that's been in my wife's family for so long. And the house was gonna fall over, but like the way Midwestern houses do, and,
sure.
Because a country block, that used to support 10 families is now farmed by one family, and all the other old houses just gradually rot. And I grew up in the country down in Southern Illinois, and really, really liked being a country kid a lot. And we were out in Denver at the time we moved, and I have not a bad word to say about cities. I think cities are awesome. I like city people just fine. I enjoyed living in a city tremendously. There's some nice stuff about living in a city, like food, for instance. And there's
ironically,
just, Yeah, right. Ironically, but man, I mean, especially if you go to the strip mall ethnic places, man, the food, you get good food. That's not even that expensive. And um, just the music, like music. There's a lot good live music, and I just like being around people. It's fun to be around people. I like people, and I like to be around people. I'm a pretty extroverted person. Um, And so there are a lot. I mean, I didn't hate the city, and I don't hate the city. I like to visit the city, but I also like at the same time to set things on fire whenever I feel like it, and not worry about if anybody has anything to say about it. I really like fires, and I value autonomy a lot, and I liked growing up in the country, and so the part of it was like, hey, we can give our kids that lifestyle. We had, my parents were at the time in Southern Illinois. They've actually moved up here now, which is amazing, but they were in Southern Illinois at the time. And Emily's parents were just right down the road. And her grandma, and we have great relationships. We're both lucky. We have great, like, my relationship with my parents is amazing. Her relationship with her parents, like, and it just felt like we are 1,000 miles away from grandparents who love us, love our kids, want to be involved. This is stupid. This is like real dumb. Why are we so far away? And so that was a huge part. And then the farm, I care a lot about the health of the earth, right? Like, that's a prime motivator for me. I care a lot about that, and I worry a lot about that. And I was a vegetarian actually for. It's always funny because I farm cattle now, but I was a vegetarian for 12 years. Emily was a vegetarian for like 15 years. Long time. And I still think there's actually a strong argument to be made for practical vegetarianism. Maybe not ideological all the time, meat is bad vegetarianism, but for practical vegetarianism, I think there's a pretty strong argument for it still, because I think you're better off being vegetarian than, eating a lot of what we kind of refer to as factory farm meat.
Sure.
So, I think that there's still, and that was sort of my, when I was vegetarian, I was like kind of horrified by, animal mistreatment and manure lagoons, and, just the whole thing, was repugnant.
You're not the first person to tell me that. I've heard that, like, that's becoming a common story. Yeah, I've heard that. Like, oh, gross. Like, that's what we're eating. Like, I'm going vegetarian because at least you can't, like, I guess, abuse like lettuce or something. I mean, like, you kind of can,
Yeah,
but
you're not good.
not the same.
Yeah, but like, it's not going to get real sad. Like, torturing soybeans doesn't feel as morally problematic. It just doesn't.
Right.
Now it's less visible. Like, yeah, now, I mean, I view that differently now. I don't view the horrors of what animal agriculture sort of actually practically is. Like, I mean, I think that's important to know too, is like, so many people talk about regenerative ag, and they talk about grass fed beef, and and I think we always have to keep in mind that that's a small segment of what the meat industry is. Like, it's not big. And there are still big problems. Yeah, the animal mistreatment is really hard with that, like the way the hogs are raised. Mm-hmm. And that's awful. It's just bad.
So is that how you came around to growing your own food?
So, okay. Yeah. Thanks for reeling me back in.
Sure.
as I said at the beginning, I was having a mulberry bramble from liqueur that I made with mulberries from here, right? So if I drift,
Nice.
that's why.
That's totally fine, man.
And I've mentioned this before, on Twitter, but like the seed of moving here for me, other than the family stuff I mentioned, which probably is honestly number one. I mean, having 4 grandparents who, you get along with really well and want to be in your kid's life it's just, you want to be close to that. But the ecological piece and the farm piece was like maybe 8 or 9 years before we moved. It was, I went to in Fort Collins, Colorado. It was like the first or the second Sustainable Living Fair, which went on to become a big event there. And we lived in Fort Collins. It was a really fun town to live in. And one of the speakers there was Wes Jackson, who founded the Land Institute. And, his whole premise is breeding using traditional plant breeding techniques, not GMO, but breeding perennial grains. Perennial grains, and he talked about the problems of annual agriculture and the problems with that creates as far as soil erosion and losing topsoil. And he called at the time, he used the word natural systems agriculture a lot. And just the idea that he was talking about perennials and mimicking nature, and and this idea of managing food production, not just as extractive, but doing it in a way that was beneficial. It produced a crop, but it was also and no one used the word regenerative back then. That wasn't a word, but it was beneficial to the land that it came from. And so it wasn't this extractive thing. That was really what got me, and thinking like, there's 300 acres in the Midwest that, if we loved it and cared for it, could become more whole, and could become really productive and beautiful, and full of life. And so it's that vision for me more than any sort of thing about like self-sufficiency. Although again, I don't have a negative impact about it. I'm just saying that's never been the thing that's grabbed me by the heart. Although I think about that a lot now, especially in the age of climate disruption and things like that. It's less about maybe like self-sufficiency now and more about 10 years from now being like, well, if it'd be pretty awesome to have, tons of chestnut and hazelnut and pasture for cattle and things like that. They're pretty resilient to lots of different weather types, so that it can still be productive, for ourselves and for others. So that vision motivates me for sure. But it's never really been for me just about like, I want to grow all the food we eat. Although, I mean, we did that 2 nights ago. It was great. Or 3 nights ago, whatever. I don't know. Had a meal that was 100% stuff that we grown. And that's a great feeling when everything on your plate is stuff that you produce. Like, that's a really, really cool feeling.
Oh, sure. I'm going to get there someday. Don't know when, but I'm going to get there someday. I mean, if I just eat a whole plate of eggs, I'm there. So
there you go. Yeah. And then fit. Well, okay. Well, it goes great with eggs. Potatoes. Plant a couple of potato plants.
Oh, I was going to say steak, but.
Oh, well, yeah. Steak and eggs is good. But, potatoes and eggs, like, that's a good breakfast right there. Just, get a hog and you can have some bacon. You can cook the eggs in some bacon fat. You have bacon, eggs, and potatoes, and that is the breakfast of champions.
I am buying half a hog this year from a buddy of mine who's actually been on the podcast. So he's just like 15 minutes away from me. So I'm looking forward to that.
Nice.
So tell me a little bit about your operation. So you said you have chickens, cows, a garden. Did you say ducks? No ducks?
We have had ducks. We don't at the moment. I really want ducks again. We have a pond, kind of a pond. I mean, it's a pond. It's half, 3/4 of an acre, and it's kind of deep, but it's really covered with moss right now. We haven't quite been able to figure that out, but I really would like to have more ducks. We had them for a while, and they were great. I think they ended up inside of coyotes. And we have chickens, and we always have just like a little personal egg flock. Garden every year. Like I said, I feel like I'm kind of a bad gardener, but it's because I'm too busy, you know. And so one of the cool things, and this has been like an amazing thing, is that my parents ended up moving up here, and my dad is a incredible gardener. Like he's a school teacher, spent all his summers gardening, his entire life, and the guy can garden. My mom too, but my dad still got like the energy.
Sure.
And so he's been coming out, and so he moved up here. They just moved up here this year, and they live in town. And so he's kind of adopted my garden and my 11-year-old, and he's like teaching Miles how to garden, and Miles is into it. So it's really the coolest thing in the world to see my dad teaching my son, you know, passing this thing, and it's something that I'm kind of in and out of and interested in and learning from, but to see that really that transmission happen is amazing and awesome to watch. And just in 1 year, like my weedy, not that productive garden last year is like pretty nice. No credit to me at all.
Sure.
And next year it's going to be amazing. It's going to be like, look out. Not any credit. I don't get credit for that, other than I guess, creating the conditions for it to happen, like moving here and doing a lot to like create the conditions for that to happen. I'll take credit for that, but like it's really cool. It's really cool to, it's great for both my dad and for Miles to have that with each other, for Miles to be able to receive that from his grandfather, and for my dad to be able to pass that on. And my dad loves to garden, and I'm learning a lot too. And I think it makes me feel more manageable about it. And I like seeing how my dad sort of literally organizes his brain around the garden, and he has for 50 years. He organizes his work. He organizes his whole mental life, not his whole mental life, but a huge part of his mental life. Like it helps, like it structures so much, and it's clear to see it. It's like he stays in tune with the material world, and he stays in tune with what the garden needs. He's attending to it and paying really close attention, and he knows, and he's engaged, but it gives him such structure and such focus that it's really neat to see as a 44-year-old now, rather than like a 12-year-old running around, and dad was in the garden all the time, and I did not care at all. Did not care at all. But now I have another chance. I have a second chance to learn the things that I didn't choose to learn when I was young.
Yeah, you can learn them from your son.
Yeah, right. Man, there's no better. I don't know. I'm sure dads or parents generally out there can relate. There's almost no better feeling than when your kid teaches you something. I love it. I love it. I love it so much when they teach you something that you didn't know. Like, it's the best.
Even though my kid is only 2, he's already like teaching me stuff like how to be a good dad, like learning patience, learning how to better communicate, like all these like little things, like that's like super helpful to me. Obviously being more patient is always going to be better than not having any patience, but like I'm also looking forward to like the day he'll like come to me and like want to talk to me about like everything he just learned about like great white sharks or something like that. Be like, yeah, tell me about it. Like, yeah. I want to know what you know.
Both the boys love those nature documentaries. They always have, especially the older boy. He's been since forever. He's loved those, just yeah, that's a huge thing, in our whole family. That's a big part of our family culture is nature, natural world, living things, growing things, animals, a lot of animals, because Emily, like I said, she's an animal person.
Sure.
Just loves every animal that moves except possums.
I think
it's a weird thing.
I think that was the other thing that popped up on Twitter, like whether or not you should kill a possum or something like that. I think that was another topic of discussion recently.
I'm against killing possums in general. I mean, yeah, whatever. You're managing your own place. I get it. They're not a problem for me here. They don't create problems. They're kind of funny. I know my wife hates them, so I kind of like to leave them around because it's funny. But I hate raccoons. Raccoons are the problem here. Like oh my God, they're cute. They're cute and cuddly, and you think, oh, raccoons. Look at that cute little animal, and they're kind of smart, but they're a menace.
That is true. My neighbor just shot like 5 of them, and I was like, thanks for the predator control, because I just let my chickens just wander all around the place, and I probably don't lock them all up at night because I'm not counting them all. So like whoever's here gets to stay safe. But
yeah,
so a little bit more about your property. You were talking about like, mowing the grass and letting the woods kind of creep into the pasture a little bit for creating like an edge and whatnot. What other things on your property do you have? Like, do you have swales? Do you do hugelkultur? Do you, let the cows run into the pasture and then, a couple days later, let the chickens go into that pasture, break up cow patties or anything like that?
We had a real, I posted a thread one time about all the unsuccessful things I've tried. It's by far from a exhaustive list. And one of the ones I did hugelkultur, and it was a hilarious misadventure. Because I dug a huge trench, and put a bunch of wood in there, and I mean it was fine. It grew really good squash and pumpkins and things like that would grow on it. But literally anything can grow squash and pumpkins around here, like anything, anywhere.
Sure.
Like you just like throw those seeds in the air and they'll grow plants anywhere, right? Like if you just throw a little bit around here. So it's like, that's not much of an accomplishment, but it did make a big ugly mound that I regretted for 6 or 7 years before. No, not that long, for 4 or 5 years before I dug it out and flattened it out. And so it didn't work very well, but I probably didn't do it right. It's like a lot of the other things I've tried. I'm like, I get an idea, looks great on Google. Right. I read a few articles about it. I'm like, that looks awesome. I try it and I'm like, what the no. So I didn't enjoy hugelkultur. We haven't done the chicken. We've, the boys are interested in chickens, and we will. I think this winter. I think this winter will finally be the winter we're going to build, because we have the wagon and we got everything we need. And I think we have this winter we're going to build a, egg mobile to run chickens out in the pasture behind the cows. We've talked about it for a couple of years, just hasn't happened. I think this will be the year that we do it. I'm looking forward to that. I really want to add sheep in at some point. A lot. So that's we haven't, but I'm curious about that. We planted a bunch of trees this year but that was a CRP program. We put some acreage into CRP, so we were able to put a lot of really nice trees in, and that was really exciting. Like a huge windbreak.
Nice. That's awesome.
And so that's a nice one. And then, because we have sort of had, we've been learning, right? Like we got cattle 4.5 years ago, I think it was, is when we first, so the first like 5 years here, we just like landed, and we're like, whoa, what are we doing here? And I was establishing, my self-employment income, and our kids were little, and we were just like, okay, how do we be here, right? Then about 5 years, and then about 5 years ago, it's like, okay, well, how do we take this to the next step? And it's like, well, let's get some cattle. We like, that's because I'm really drawn to the vision of pasturing, both silvopasture and rotational grazing, and just I'm just like philosophically totally aligned, interested. And so we've really been learning. It's sort of been, that's been what we've done, like just learning about how to do it. Like, how do you have cattle? What do you need to do? How do you handle them? How do you maintain them? What vaccinations do they need? How do you wean them? What do you like? How do you calve them? What's the best time of year to calve? What's the best time of year to calve based on your goals? How do you get everybody calving at once? There's a million questions, a million. And just kind of at the beginning, we're like, okay, well, maybe we know something. And then clearly realized that we didn't. And now at this point, kind of like know a little bit, but also know what we don't know, and see the challenges of like developing a whole system, that works, like and part of that's been, we've done that on the acreage that has been around our house. We have a kind of a distinct area around our house that's like, I don't know, 10, 12 acres. And then there's a lot of other pasture on that. Now, our farm we don't farm the cropland. We work with a couple really amazing Mennonite brothers who they farm it organically. So it's certified organic. They farm it organically.
What, just like lease it out or something?
Yeah. They lease that, and also the pasture has been leased to them as well. But it won't be in next. So we're going to sort of like, this is the year where it's like, hey, we've learned some stuff, learned a lot, and now we're going to kind of like expand the herd and expand our pasture, expand into managing much more pasture, and so we have we have a plan, to do that, and we have the resources in place to do that. I am really, the only problem I need to really solve is having the time dedicated to it. That seems to be my continual problem.
Sure.
But so that's sort of how, we've been kind of learning in this area that we have had, and kind of tried a bunch of stuff. And I think I talk a lot about the stuff that didn't work. Like, some stuff has worked, and we have learned a lot. But I think now, okay, it's like, all right, now we're going to grow into this much bigger area, and manage, a lot more pasture, and some, we were able this year to work with our farmers. Now we've been grazing cover crops a lot. And in fact, we had, like, in the middle of the summer, they cut their wheat, but they always plant clover behind it. So they had a nice stand of clover come up, and we talked to them about, and that gave us some nice, summer grazing, to help our pastures rest, because it's been super hot and the pastures have been pretty stunted. So it was really a godsend that we were able to do some of that. Although then we realized, well, what do you do for shade in the middle of a freaking field and it's hot? And so then it's like, well, now we have to figure out how to solve that. Like, it's all, and that's part of what's been like, it's problem, like, which I kind of like the problem solving, but at the same time, it's just always like, oh gosh, I didn't think of that. Now, I don't know. What do you do about
There's
that?
a lot of fires you got to put out.
A whole lot. And that's, I think, what I was getting at too. And I was like, it's kind of hard. Like, it's a lot of that. Like, a lot of like, I didn't even know that was a thing. Not only is it a thing, it's a crucial thing. And I don't know what to do. Okay. Better read something, talk to somebody, figure something, make something, buy something. What? It's, and so you learn, you learn from doing that again and again and again and again and again. And I think you get fewer surprises, but and then stuff breaks. Oh, does stuff ever break? And that's no fun. That's no fun.
So let's go into stuff that you have tried that's worked well, like stuff you've learned. Can you give me some examples?
Sure. Well, like I said, the garden, which I guess I'm not getting personal. What I've learned about the garden too is that um, you have a lot of this goes with everything. You have a lot of ideas, and ideas aren't worth much um, until you try them, and that's what's worth everything. You try them, and then you can kind of like learn by doing. Even great ideas that you read about aren't that great when you try them at first. They're just rarely, and at least in my experience, but they're still worth doing because you try them, and then if you pay attention and see them through, and that's the real key, is is if you just dump something back, well, that didn't work. Well, then it pretty much is wasted time. But if you're like, well, why didn't it work? And what could I do differently? And what, like, that can be, um, that's there's a lot of richness there.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I have tended to be way too, under structured with gardening, and it's like, well, actually, giving a lot more structure really, really helps. Like, really helps a lot. So I
Hmm.
like have all these like romantic notions of a relatively wild garden that kind of takes care of itself, and it's like, no, no, it doesn't, because I don't know. I mean, maybe somewhere else it might, right? And um, you just put the right plants in, and kind of. But like in Central Illinois, what will happen is the weeds will get 5 foot tall before you blink. It's amazing. Oh my gosh, the weeds here are staggering, and they, like, you'll get giant ragweed that will grow up to 7 feet tall in 2 weeks. It's unbelievable. And like, you just take over everything. Like, it's like clear that like this just wants to all be plants 7 feet tall. Everything wants to be that. And you're like battling that, and if you pretend that you're not, um you lose. So you have to make, and a lot of structure helps with that, so that you can clearly define, you know what's going where, and so it's like much more structured than I wanted to be at first, and that seems to work much better. But that's specific to here.
Sure.
um
I think that's a good
Now
tip,
we have
though.
actually.
Just structure in the garden. I think that's a really good tip. Like I've heard the example of like if all you have is 15 minutes to do the garden, like when you get out there, I only have 15 minutes, so I'm going to make the most of it and just like do as much as you can in those 15 minutes. Whereas like you just like, oh, I just don't have time. I'll do it tomorrow, and things fall apart. And that's how you end up with 7 foot weeds.
Mhm, mhm. So giving it like structure in your life, and structure, like physical structure in the garden, like defined beds, um being pretty persnickety about straight rows, um like all the things that the old timers do, that um you think may or may not, when you're younger, you kind of think like, well, you really have to do it that way, and then you're like, yeah, they do it that way for a reason. Keep everything like persnickety straight. Be
Hmm.
fastidious about a lot of things. Give it a whole lot of structure. um those are generally good things to do in my experience, and I mean, I'm sure there are definitely exceptions to that, but like it's especially for like annual crops, like, yeah, do that. At least that's been my experience. With perennials, you can be a little more whimsical and playful, and they'll kind of figure it out, it seems like.
Sure.
Um, but whatever. I mean, listen to me at your own risk. I've already acknowledged I'm a bad gardener, so. But I have learned a thing or two, I think. Um,
Well, you learned that you're a
Chickens, I
bad
don't know,
gardener.
and how to be better. I mean, I have learned how to be
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
How better than I was. Um, and And if you're bad at something, get help. That's a real winner of a tip there. If you're bad at something, get help from somebody else. That is a winner.
Yes. Find a mentor or something.
Yes. And don't let it stop you from trying.
Right.
Chickens, I don't know that I've learned that much about chickens, to be honest. They're just always kind of there. I have learned that raccoons will kill them if you give them the slightest opportunity. That's what I've learned about chickens, is that they're dumb and that they do not defend themselves at night at all. And that if something gets into your coop at night, they will all die, and chicken will just sit there and let a predator chew its head off. They're the dumbest. It's like at night, it's dumb. I don't understand. It's like they turn their survival instinct off at dark. They get in that tree and they're like, well, I am safe now. So you absolutely must. And we've had pretty good luck with free range chickens, actually. Now, one thing that I did learn too is that there's a place adjacent, because we actually switched to free range chickens, and it works better than it did when we kept them pinned in. We have a lot more luck, and we have a better survival rate with them free ranging than when they were pinned. They can fly, they can escape a lot. They can, like, during the day, they actually do keep themselves pretty safe, unless they are going somewhere where there's tall grass. At least this is around us. We've never had sky predators. I don't think we've ever lost a single bird to a hawk. So someone else, if that's a problem you have, then the free range thing might work a lot less. I don't know, but our place never lost a single bird to a hawk. But we have lots of raccoons, and I think maybe a weasel. And if they can get to tall grass, we would have predators that would hide in the grass, and then they would ambush the chickens. We lost some to that. But if we keep the grass cut down where the chickens go, and if the chickens can kind of see what's around them, they have been pretty good at keeping themselves safe. So as long as they can roam and range all they want, they come back. Really, it's a great thing about chickens. The sun goes down, they're in the coop. You don't have to round them. They're like, that's home. That's where we go. And just make sure they're locked up. And we've had time too where we've had because that's been a job the boys have had, so they've had to deal with the consequence of forgetting to lock the chickens up before, which is horrible and makes you really mad. But also, I think it's not probably in the long run a bad thing for them to learn. Right, he definitely is learning something the hard way. So we've kind of learned at least how to. At least the risks to birds here. But they're pretty, chickens are really easy. We don't even feed them for 8 months at all,
Dang.
They just eat. Yeah. We have food in their coop, but they don't eat it. We can maybe go through 2 bags of food. They don't eat much food. They scavenge really well. So that's worked. So my kind of wild let things happen philosophy within limits is kind of working with the chickens right now.
Sure. Yep.
It doesn't work with the garden at all. They even have access to the garden, and they don't do much damage in there, which I saw a thread on Twitter, about people like, oh man, that's the dumbest thing in the world. They'll eat all your vegetables. And I get it. And it seems like they would, but they don't. If they did, I have poultry netting. Last year I fenced it off. This year I didn't bother putting it up, and they did get some pumpkins last year, I guess. So we'll see if they start getting to the pumpkins again. That'd be no fun. But by and large, that works. And I love. It's lovely having chickens just roaming everywhere. That's fun. They kind of just do their own thing. We need to get more, but that works. And then with cattle, we just, I don't even know where to start with that. We've I don't know that there's been any great successes other than the fact that we've grown our herd and that we know a lot more about them. And And I think that we haven't suffered a lot of catastrophic. I mean, I think anytime you have animals, bad things happen. And we've lost a couple, and really sad. It's always sad to lose an animal, especially like a big animal like that. But
Right.
I mean, I think we've learned to take care of the herd and meet their needs. And by all, I mean, there's still a lot to learn. I don't put myself out there as any kind of expert on this in the slightest, but I do think that we know so much more than we did 4 years ago. And I think that's the success there. And we managed to grow the herd and have successful calf crops, and market a few. We've marketed a few animals when we're still building the herd, so there hasn't been a lot, and that's been we've done that, and I think we'll do that a lot more in the next 2 years. But we've kind of done a lot of the things at least once now. There's a lot we need to do. I mean, we'll do repetition and at a bigger scale, but we've done probably most things like once now, or at least, if not more. We've learned to, well, here's one. I mean, here's kind of and it's not a complete success story because we have one big stubborn cow who doesn't get it. And she's just, but working cattle at first was a disaster. It's just so hard to do. They don't go where you want them to go. And I kind of was like, read about like this bud box, and I tried to just using cattle panels or whatever, rig this thing up. And we had this chute that we got off of Facebook Marketplace. And they wouldn't go through it. And it was awful. And just getting them into the we built a chute that led into the working chute, and it just was awful and miserable because they just wouldn't do it. And they can be really frustrating and stubborn animals if you don't know how to work with them. And I think a combination of we have a pretty small herd. We have like 20 animals, and they all know us, and so they're pretty tame. I mean, not completely, but pretty tame. And we're just better at working with them now. And we also, and my 14-year-old and I we're like, we need to set this up differently. And so we moved around all cattle panels, and we kind of, without basing it on a design that we'd read about, we're like, well, this should work because every time you move this way, they're going to want to go this way. And the first time we ran them through, it was like bloop, 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 like a breeze. And it worked. And that was neat. So it was like this physical evidence that we're kind of like understanding cattle behavior and how to work with them. I mean, I can also provide counterexamples from this week, but whatever, we don't need to talk about that.
I did want to get into, I got like 20 minutes before I gotta go take care of some stuff. I did want to get into the biggest challenge in farming that you faced.
The biggest challenge.
The biggest challenge.
It's expensive.
I haven't heard that one before. But yeah, that's very
true. It's expensive for real. That's a big one. And I don't. I mean, I think there's like an argument like you can bootstrap it and it doesn't have to be, but like with cattle, there's things that just like it's like, oh well, then you need fence and you need the like a working chute was really like a thing that we felt like, bitch, we're gonna need that. And doing the rotations, just how do you get all the equipment and the reels around? Like you need some sort of a vehicle to do that. I mean, you can have a cart and walk it, I guess. Like there are less expensive ways, I think, probably to do everything, but not free. And it's expensive. So that's a big one. But I mean, the biggest, I don't know if it's the biggest, but it's definitely a real major challenge.
No, I'd agree with that. I think a lot of people don't look at like, well, maybe they don't think about expense as a challenge, because like how much more could you get done if you just had infinite money, right? I mean, you could like, oh yeah, come on in and dig me some swales. Like, oh, 30
Mm-hmm.
grand, whatever. I don't care.
Yeah.
Hey, come in and dump, let's see, about 1,000 yards of wood chips for me, and and spread it out. Cool, thanks. Just like look at how much you could get done with just money.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh
I,
my
I had
gosh, so
a,
much.
I had a, I did like a TikTok video a couple days ago, and it's like, isn't it like kind of crazy how bad like farmers, homesteaders, and gardeners like want this lifestyle that we're willing to work more and get paid less just to have it? Like, how much money
Mm-hmm.
do we just dump into this thing to have it? And like financially, it usually like it doesn't pencil out, at least for a long, long time.
Yeah.
But the lifestyle is the return on the investment. Like
Mm.
that's it. That's the thing. So
That's it. I do think in the long term, I think it'll come back. But yeah,
right, but you just need to
it's
look way out.
substantial. It's substantial, for sure. I mean, I'd be lying if I hadn't thought about how many amazing fly fishing vacations I could have taken. And think sometimes like, what the fuck am I doing? I could be on the oh man, I would like to stand on the banks of the um the Slough Creek in Yellowstone. That'd be all right. But no, I try not to go there.
Sure. Sure.
um,
So to counter that, what would you say the best part about farming is?
um, well, if you like being outside, it's pretty great.
I do like being
And
outside.
so to kind of go like just with the challenge, it's like it's like there's basically you have time, money, and experience. Like these are like the main challenges. I don't know anything. I don't have time. I don't have money. Right? Like those are the hard parts. Right? And so you got to solve at least some of those. And you're probably not going to be if you had all three. Like you're going to conquer the world. Like it's great. Right? Like if you got time, money, and knowledge, you can do a lot. Right? But you can do a lot if you can do one of those things and have patience. Two of those things and have patience, but like those three things, you have to learn to know something. You need some resources or a way of getting resources, and you have to take time to do it. And if you do have time where you can just enjoy, and this is what I was going to connect to the what's the best thing about it is like a lot of it's really fun. Like if you enjoy being outside, if you like solving problems, like sometimes I call it like a knucklehead. Farming, you do a lot of like knucklehead carpentry or knucklehead engineering, knucklehead this, knucklehead that, where you don't really know what you're doing, but you're like, hey, let's figure this out, and that's fun. That's like a blast to do. It's like
That is fun. I like doing that a lot.
the first time I built high tensile electric fencing was like like watching YouTube videos and learning to tie these knots with the wire, but it was fun and I liked it. And it's going back to the beginning, I was talking about my work as a psychotherapist. Like that's a great farming as a as long as like I'm not having to do too much, which has been my problem lately. But as long as it's like a more balanced, they're great counterbalance to each other, right? Because with farming, it's like tangible and you can see it. Like I build a fence, I can see the fence that's done, and I move the cattle to a new paddock. And I can see like there's the paddock they grazed off, and there they are in chest deep grass, and that's a great feeling. It's tangible. So it's a wonderful counterbalance to work that's more head-based, intellectual, interactive, like just important and good. But it's not. There's something really nice about tangible, work that you can see and feel, and that's great. Being able to see what you've done, and then to know like at the end of the day, everybody's got to eat. Like it's something you can feel good about, you know, and so you're making food for people, um, which is another challenge, especially with
Yeah.
animals, because you love them. You do. I mean, at least we do. Um, like really, like love them, and that's hard, right? Like that's hard. Like slaughter is hard. Not we don't do it, but like just the driving an animal that you've raised and taking them and dropping them off is hard to do. It's a terrible feeling.
Sure.
Um, and it's necessary, and we believe in it, and it's vital, but don't like that. I doubt I ever really will. I kind of hope I mean, I hope I don't become desensitized to that, to be honest. Because I think that's, you know, that's like right there at the heart of the challenge in the roar. You're making food for people
Right.
to live on, to sustain themselves on. That's good and wonderful. And then, but it, you know, it costs these other creatures. They're like, you know, and cows are kind of dumb, but they're not. They were acting real dumb today. We got one that almost gave herself heat stroke because she wouldn't go in the shade. She's fine, but it's like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? You don't have to. But by and large, they're pretty good at meeting their own needs. They're definitely really social. Um, they have big, beautiful eyes. You get to know them. They get to know you. They're a lot more interesting than I ever thought they were. And they're so calm, man. If you want to relax, like you go out in the evening,
I
and
do
just be
want to
with them when
relax.
they're.
That
I know,
does
me
sound
too. I
nice.
need to do. I got to take my advice more on this for
You
sure.
should
Just
integrate
go out.
your psychotherapist with your farm. Bring your clients to your property and just like do work while they're discussing their problems. Maybe they
Well,
get
you know,
involved.
the idea of some sort of a retreat here is not impossible. It's not in the next 2 or 3 years, 5 years probably, because we're going to be like I mentioned before, focused on kind of scaling up the cattle. But that's not impossible. That's something that's sort of like in the back of my mind. This would be really really neat, you know, as we kind of make this place, you know, more of an oasis, and we kind of get our bearings and get into the rhythm that we're trying to find and create, which is really hard. But that word, that word, I think really resonates with me. You know, just finding the rhythm. You know, there's a rhythm to seasons. There's a rhythm to a day. And finding those rhythms, and tuning into them. You know, and then the idea of bringing other people into that, is attractive, but I don't feel like we're there, and may never be, and that's fine. But it's in the back of my mind.
They can just shadow you for the day or the hour or however long they're booked for. Just like, all right, I gotta fix this fence or whatever, and
Mhm.
you know, this is our session.
Well, now it would just be me. It would just be them watching me, not have
Swear.
enough time to finish and swear, and like not all the time. I exaggerate sometimes. It's not always. I, um, I exaggerate in a little bit,
That's fine.
but it definitely does include that sometimes, um, for sure. But it is nice to be out and being, you know, in the evening in a pasture, and the cattle, they just, them eating their grass and just chewing, and the sounds out there is pretty sublime. It's pretty sublime. They're just, you know, nice sunset, nice, you know, maybe, um, it's starting to cool off a little bit because it's been hot, but and you know, and they're just chill, man. Cows are, now they can be real flighty. They're not always chill, but when a cow is chill, it is the most chill. Like it is like chill,
Sure.
deep chill. Is
That
hanging
sounds
around cows.
pretty nice.
If they're like, all right, you're cool, you can be here, and they're just doing their thing. It's like you can just like vibe on a cow, and it's pretty cool.
Vibe on a cow.
Yeah.
I've been taking little like notes, and I might just post like Nate isms every now and then, just like as a follow up, like maybe one a week or something like that. I already forgot we said something about like vibe with a cow or something.
Vibe on a cow. Yeah. Get
Vibe
out and
on a
vibe on a
cow.
cow.
Yes. So, wrapping up here, what would you tell people that wanted to get started?
Don't bite off too much too fast. Like there's that. I mean, like I said, like I have this sort of like Nate's laws of homesteading that I said, like I kind of, not that don't take them too seriously, but they are things I have learned, and some of them are tongue in cheek, but some of them are like genuinely things I feel like I have learned the hard. Don't bite off more than you can chew at first, right? Like don't do everything at once. Get your feet under you and take off. Do a small project, and learning from failure is good. I'm not to say it's not, but also like having success is also really good. And you don't always have to learn from failure. Like you will,
Right.
and if you get ambitious, you will, and that's okay, and that's good. There's a lot to be learned, but man, there's a lot to be said for just like, man, I put a little raised bed in, and it was awesome. Stuff grew, and it was great. Um, and I think, especially at first, um, not biting off more than you can chew. That would be my number one for sure. You know, number one with the bullet. That one.
Number one with a bullet. So, um, so you've actually have your own podcast that you sent to me. Do you wanna tell people about that at all?
Sure. Yeah. I
It's
would.
interesting. It is interesting, especially the episode that I listened to. It's yeah. Tell them about it.
Well, we didn't get into this today at all. Which is fine. This is a whole. I'm not a practitioner. Of this profession. I always want to clarify that because there are people who are. Um, on the research end and underground, but I'm very interested in and have been for a very long time psychedelics and psychedelic assisted therapy. And there's a whole very long story there for me, but it's something I'm really curious about, really interested in, um, and and the podcast is called Altered States of Context, where my podcast partner and I talk with each other and do interviews with people who are, involved in various aspects of psychedelics, including most prominently psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, but not exclusively that, to just sort of understand and help people understand what it is, how it works, although we don't know. Like, so that's mostly speculative, and what can be learned from it, and to try to humanize it a little bit. A lot of people have a lot of preconceived notions about it, and so we go, just directly into, all of that, all of people's biases, what they think, or they've been taught about it, and what's happening, because it's fast changing. It's super fascinating. Like I said at the beginning, I'm super fascinated by people and how our minds work, how social interactions work, how we are as social beings, and our internal lives and our external lives. And I feel like psychedelics lie right and smack in that, and illuminate a whole lot. And there's some accumulating evidence that they also seem to be pretty helpful at helping people shift perspective and maybe making positive changes in their lives. So that's the podcast, Altered States of Context.
That is that whole world is completely foreign to me. And when we first connected, you like sent me like, hey, I got a podcast set up too. I'm like, oh, cool. What is it? And you told me, and I listened to a bad trip episode, and I had told you
Mhm.
that like spoiler alert for those that want to listen, you more or less like your trip was like your life was like a lie, like nothing actually happened, like there's like just huge segments of your reality just wasn't actually the reality. Is am I close?
Ballpark, sure. Yeah. I mean, for a one sentence description, yeah, good enough.
So, and then I told you my wife has dreams every once in a while that are similar to that. Like before we moved into this house, she had a dream that she like walked into like she like got up out of bed and was like in our apartment, and she like called to me, but I wasn't there. I was never there. Like I was like a complete like figment of her imagination or something like that. And she's like, it was like really freaky and super vivid, and it just like threw her off like definitely all day, and probably like a couple days following, just like that would be like a real bad time.
Yeah, it can be. That particular episode was the topic was bad trips because and part of our commitment on that show is to explore. There are there's benefits. There's also risks. The risks aren't necessarily, in my view, in my opinion, the same risks that people say are the risks. Some of the risks that people say are risks are really, I don't consider them very risky at all. But some of the ones I think get talked about less are actually substantial. And just understanding as much as we can about it, and learning as much as we can about it. I had experiences when I was younger that I just simply, the short version is I just simply couldn't deny and had profoundly positive impacts on my life. And I mean, I can't lie about that. That's true. That's what happened. I learned things and was impacted in a way that set my life on a course that was far better than the course it was on before. And that happened for sure. And it happened because of experiences I had that were as clear as day, that communicated to me the way you're living isn't right and your life isn't going to be good, or you can change. And it's just like I understood, boom, and I did. There's a lot. I mean, I could talk a lot more about that, but the short version is that. And I mean, I think anybody who knew me at the time and anybody who would look at the changes in my life would say, like, wow, you really changed. That's all good stuff. You were really kind of a fuck up, and then you weren't a fuck up anymore real quick, like real fast. That changed awful fast. And it did. It was sort of undeniable. And so then that experience was like, well, hold on a second. I think there's like, because, at that point too, that was the late 90s. And, the propaganda against it was still, I mean, it still is to a degree, but really, really, really strong. And at that point I was like, well, okay, there's more to this story. There's a lot more to this story. And so I've had a certain loyalty to that ever since. Cause I'm like, well, if my life changed that positively, then I just can't get on board with,
Right.
with the propaganda stuff. I can't get on board with people going to jail for this. Like I can't be on board with that. Like that doesn't jive with my truth at all.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Like I literally experienced this thing that is counter to what you're saying happens. Like, so no, I get that a lot. That makes a lot of sense.
Not saying there aren't risks. Not saying that they're I'm not saying it's like candy and totally safe. Not at all. Would never say that. Don't say that on
right.
show. Don't say that at all. But I am saying that there is a lot to the story, and that it's fascinating and can be, it can be beneficial.
Yes, agreed. So, you've got your Substack, Tripping with Nate. I'll have a link for that in the show notes. Obviously, you're on Twitter, and your wife's farm Instagram. I can have that linked in the show notes.
Yeah,
and,
that'd be great. She hasn't been
and
posting as much the last few months, but I think she's going to get back to it. It was a nice
Sure.
little feed. She just, usually puts a little, just pictures the animals a lot and kind of some, her thoughts and whatnot. But
yeah, if I didn't have a aggressive rooster to take care of this week, like tonight, I would definitely stay longer to talk more about lots of stuff. But it's already 9:00 here, so I got to go deal with that. Hey man, I really appreciate your time.
That's good. Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for being here.
This was fun.
Yes. Thank you for being here, and thank you everyone for listening. And we'll see you later.
Bye.